Today, we're going to get into a really powerful idea from the classic text, the Kybalion. It's the principle of cause and effect. But we're not going to treat this like some abstract philosophy, okay? We're going to look at it as a super practical tool for navigating, modern life. So let's get into it.
So let me ask you this. Do you ever feel like you're just reacting all day long? You're getting pushed and pulled by your job, by other people's needs, or just by random stuff that happens? The Kybalion has this perfect metaphor for it, feeling like a pawn on the chessboard of life. It's that draining, exhausting feeling of being moved around by forces you can't control, always just playing defense. So in this explainer, we're going on a very specific journey together. First, we're going to really get our heads around this principle of causation. Then, we'll look at the choice it gives us. Are we going to be an effect, or are we going to be a cause? And finally, we'll walk through a really practical method to actually make that shift, to go from being passively affected by life to actively causing the outcomes you want.
Okay, so first things first, let's get to the absolute heart of the matter, the law of causation.
Now, the core idea here is pretty radical when you think about it. The Kybalion is basically saying that nothing just happens. Everything is part of this huge, unbroken chain of events. And that thing we call chance or luck, well, that's just a name we give to a cause that we can't see or maybe just don't understand yet.
The book gives this brilliant example. Imagine a stone falls off a mountain and crashes through someone's roof. We might say, wow, what a random chance event. But was it? Think about it. It was actually the result of this long, orderly chain of causes. The rain that loosened the soil, the sun that baked the rock and created cracks, the geological forces that pushed the mountain up in the first place. See, every single event is just one link in this massive, interconnected chain.
So this brings us to a really fundamental choice. Are you going to be a pawn or are you going to be a player?
And this is the crucial question, right? Are we going to let ourselves be a pawn, just moved around by the game? Or are we going to become a player? Someone who understands the rules and starts making intentional moves. This is really the difference between living a life of pure reaction versus a life of conscious response.
And this lays out the two modes so clearly. In effect mode, you're the pawn. You're reactive. You're carried along by your environment, by other people's moods, by whatever's happening. But in cause mode, well, that's when you become the player. Now, you're not immune to the rules of the game, not at all, but you learn how to use them. You go from being a tool of the principle to a user of the principle. You start to dominate your own moods and become a mover on the board.
Okay, now it is super important to put some guardrails here. This is not about having total control over things you can't possibly control. The economy, the weather, what other people do. The Stoics used to call those externals. And this philosophy is definitely not a tool for blaming yourself or anyone else for tough circumstances. The focus here is on mastering what is within your power, your own judgments, where you put your attention, and how you choose to respond.
So, the big question is, how do we practically make this shift from pawn to player? Well, let's look at a method for choosing your cause.
The method is actually pretty simple in concept. You become the cause of your own experience by consciously choosing your inputs. If every effect has a cause, then it follows that by controlling the causes you do have access to, you can start to shape the effects in your own life.
And we can break this whole thing down into 4 key inputs that we have a pretty significant degree of control over, where we place our attention, the language we use to frame our reality, the environment we design for ourselves, and of course, the actions we choose to take. First up, attention. Think of this as your primary tool for self-regulation. Instead of letting your focus get yanked around by every little distraction and external trigger, you can actually cultivate the ability to consciously direct it. Mindfulness is really just the practice of getting better at this. It allows you to respond to a moment instead of just having that knee-jerk reaction to it.
Second, language. Psychologists have a term for this. They call it cognitive reappraisal. But the basic idea is that an event itself doesn't cause your emotion. Your interpretation of that event does. So, by changing the story you tell yourself about what's happening, you can literally change its emotional impact. You become the author of your own experience.
Third is your environment. This is a big one. Behavioral science has shown us that our surroundings create friction. A well-designed environment makes good habits feel easy and bad habits feel harder. So instead of being an effect of having junk food in the pantry, you can become the cause of healthier choices just by engineering your space to support your goals.
And finally, we have action. This is the stabilizer. It's what makes everything else real. So often we wait around to feel motivated before we do something.
The trick here is to flip that completely on its head. You act your way into a new feeling. It's called behavioral activation. Deliberate action, even if it's super small, anchors your intention in reality and starts building that momentum.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's talk about causation in action.
Okay, so at work, being an effect is feeling totally swamped by project stress. Becoming a cause is deciding ahead of time, I'm blocking off the first hour of my day for my most important task. You create the effect of focus and progress. Or in relationships, being an effect is snapping back instantly when someone says something sharp. Becoming a cause is taking that breath, pausing, and choosing a response that actually de-escalates things. And with habits, you just shift from being the effect of your environment to being the cause of a better one.
All right, now to make this real for you, let's talk about your first move.
The goal here is just to do a quick personal audit. Just take a moment and ask yourself, in the different areas of my life, where am I acting like a pawn and where am I acting like a player?
And you can use a simple table, just like this one. Pick an area of your life. Identify an effect you're experiencing, like, say, feeling tired all the time. List the probable causes, maybe poor sleep, late-night snacks. Then, and this is the most important part, choose one new cause you can introduce, just one. For example, no screens after 10 p.m. See? This makes it tangible, achievable.
So, to bring it all together, the entire journey we've just talked about is this shift from being an effect to becoming a cause. It's all about moving from that pawn-like state of automatic reaction to the player's state of conscious, chosen response.
Ultimately, the principle of causation isn't about controlling the universe. It's about taking radical responsibility for the one part of it you actually can control, your own mind and your own actions. By focusing there, you stop being a passive effect and you start becoming an active cause. So what's one small cause you can create today? In our next episode, we're going to build on this with the principle of gender. And you can find the full series playlist in the description below. Thanks for watching.